Today we're announcing that Jen Sackley has been endorsed as our candidate to stand for the seat of Leichhardt. So give her a big clap. Yeah? As you may know, Jen got 18.4% in the Cedar Cook first preferences, but after preferences she had 28%. So we hope we can improve on that and take the seat of Leichhardt. At the moment, the whole country's in a state of national crisis. You've got Tony Abbott trying to see if he's got the numbers to challenge Scott Morrison, would you believe, and the Liberal Party about to expel Malcolm Turnbull from its membership. So the whole country's devoid of leadership. In polls that I've seen right around the country, there's about 40 to 50% of Australians that have had enough with the two major parties, Liberal and Labor, and they're looking forward to voting for us at the next election. We've had a tremendous uplift in membership right across the country, and we can't only have to look at what the Liberal and Labor Party have done. Spent $55,000 million on the NBN, but what have they spent on North Queensland or you? Nothing. That's because politicians don't want to fight for you. They want to fight with each other. One of our biggest policies is bringing a 20% lower tax rate to the regions in Australia. And that's something that operated successfully in the 1960s and 70s and made the country really strong and great. Over 85% of the GDP of Australia is created outside capital cities. Yet more and more we take away the support for rural communities and we don't give them incentive. We need to get people moving from the cities to the rural communities, so we decentralise the country. Much like in the United States, you can drive from New York to Los Angeles and you see industry and people at work. What happens when you go to our rural communities? You see communities in decline, production going down, and no hope for themselves in the future. So we want to reverse that trend, and one way of doing it, we think, is bring in zonal taxation. It'll also take the pressure off the infrastructure in Sydney and Melbourne and places like that, where people now can't afford to buy a home, where the roads are clogged, and unemployment is getting higher and higher right across the country. So it's time really to put Australia first. I always say that, don't I? But it is. We've got to put our country first, our people first, and the policies that are going to work here in this country. I've had a long career in business, and I've got an obligation really to do all I can to make this country right again. And of course, you only have to walk down some of the streets in Cairns and towns, all other parts of North Queensland, and you see how this region's been neglected. For too long, we've had politicians that report to Canberra and Brisbane saying what's good for North Queensland. And now the Labor Party wants us to take an ex-union official from Victoria to tell people in North Queensland how they should vote, what they should do and what's good for them. So it's a ludicrous proposition. I just hope the people of this electorate realise it and we get Jen elected as a member for Leichhardt. So on that, I'll ask her to say a few words. Jen?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you again here this afternoon and thank you very much for coming. It's great to see so much support for the seat of Leichhardt. I guess before I start briefly about myself, I'd like to, of course, thank our federal leader, Clive Palmer, and the executive team of the United Australia Party for, I guess, their faith in me and running for the seat of Leichhardt. This pre-selection is a great honour and I take it very seriously. I'm looking forward to the up-and-coming federal election and representing you all. Who am I has been a question that's come up to me lately. In general, a lot of people know who I am in the broad brush of things, but I guess we don't get to talk about who I am. And I guess the first thing I'd like to say to you is that I'm a local girl, born and bred, or a local woman, I should say, born and bred here. And I think there's always going to be a debate around fourth or fifth generation. My aunt and uncle are sitting in the room, they'd probably say fifth. My aunt is smiling at me, so I would say I'm a fifth generation. I have the support. I'm not just a wife. Of course, I have the support of my partner and husband, Woody, sitting over there, and our children and extended family who, within a broad brush of themselves, live within the whole district and I guess the whole region of Leichhardt itself. My employment history is something that's often questioned about, and how is this going to relate to where you're going to be working and representing us in the seat of Leichhardt? And I guess, again, in a short brief for you, I have a history of myself of employment where I have held senior positions in small business, which I have owned myself. And one of those, of course, was a real estate principal here in Cairns Investment Properties. That was actually my company. Behavioural sciences is also been an area of small business that I have run successfully and managed. And all of my background, of course, and my political background, of course, is very much around and supported by my academic background, which rests upon a behavioural science degree, a BA in majors in political and social sciences, underpinned and resting now on a master's in social work, influenced heavily around social policy. I believe with my business knowledge and my knowledge of other areas of social policy, then you are in safe hands with myself, and certainly with the support of the UAP team. My political history is another question that often pops up for people, and I'd like to clear that record up very quickly for you today. I have been blessed to have had the opportunity to have run twice before as a younger woman in the seat of Leichhardt as an independent. I have also run as a PUP candidate or a Palmer United candidate, and one of my colleagues is sitting in the room there today, young Christian Wolf, where we were very successful. And in, of course, the seat of Cook at the last state election, I ran under the banner of One Nation, as we were not available for myself to go back into the fold. However, today I'm thankful that that opportunity has presented itself again. My current position is that of the State Secretary for the United Australia Party for North Queensland. And that position has allowed me to travel broadly North Queensland and mix and meet with all the locals again and support and grow the knowledge base that I've already had, much bigger now and with much more current issues, and prepare myself for this election. And for that, I guess I've been extremely grateful. Leichhardt, I'm sure you're all aware, is an area that is extremely large for many people to get their head around. Not for me, I've grown up in it. It is my backyard and my family's backyard. It is 149,000 square kilometres and a little bit more on average. It is not the largest electorate in Queensland. However, it sits very comfortably amongst those top ranking ones. It's born and based, I guess, and driven itself on industries around the sugar industry, around beef, our cattle industries, our tourism industries, our fishing, our mining, and our aquaculture, just to name a few. One of the other things I'd like to touch on here today is, and just, I guess, draw your attention to, which has been a great concern for many people and a common thread that has come through about being the forgotten North, is that federal matters for Leichhardt incorporate decisions that oversee our national interests. So when we operate at a federal level, I believe we need to be well and truly on the ground with our people. With this in mind, I'd like to take the opportunity to challenge our current Prime Minister and sitting member Warren Inch in regards to their recent bus tour to North Queensland. And I'd like them to clarify for us if they think that the national interest of this nation stops in Townsville, because it doesn't. Our pledge to you is that you will not be forgotten, that we are a strong party, that we are the United Australia Party, and we have strong leadership. Before I close for questions, I'd just like to say that Leichhardt is my home. It is home to myself, my family, and my extended family, and has been our life force for the last 5 generations. I believe that we can no longer be treated as the forgotten North, and that the major parties are no longer the leadership that you need. They have no genuine interest in your well-being or the future generations of your children. And I believe that the only future that we have is one that has to happen with a change of leadership. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jen. I'll just say that what Jen said about the bus stopping at Townsville was very interesting, because the Prime Minister didn't travel on the bus, actually. The bus was empty. It drove up and he just flew from city to city, but he didn't have enough time to come to Cairns. One of the reasons for that was, of course, Cairns has a Liberal sitting member. There's no need to come here, really. It's taken for granted. that next time everyone in Cairns will vote again the same way as they always have, as their parents have and their grandparents have, whether it's in their interest or not, they'll vote for the Liberal Party. That's the assumption that the Liberal Party has. Why waste money going to Cairns? But if they won't come and see you even at the time of an election, what are they going to do for you after the election? And you know, this is what we have to look at. We've got to demand our political leaders take our representation that our local communities give members of Parliament seriously, that they have an obligation to serve you and to serve the community, but more or less to serve our country. It's not about any one individual that really matters, it's about what happens in this country. And you can see the decline that we've been on, and we've got to do something about it. That's why I've stepped forward at 65 to do all I can to say that Australia matters, that Australians matter, and that we need to set our priorities for what's good for us. And what's good for us is growing our economy, giving people a better standard of living so that they can have more hope for themselves and for their families. And that's just the bottom line, really. And what's been happening is exactly the opposite. We've had all these international treaties where wealth has been sucked out of our nation, where we've complied with UN embargoes of what's good for Australia. But the United Nations and the European Union are basically do what's good for Europe and what's good for people in the Northern Hemisphere. They want to limit what we do here in Australia. And that's why we've got to change it around, and Australians have got to have politicians and members of Parliament that protect and defend this nation. I've got a high resolve not to let you down, I'm sure Jan has too, and I'm sure at the next election we'll make a real impact. And you've got to remember, last time we were in Parliament we held the balance of power in the Senate. We kept Qantas Australian owned. A lot of you mightn't realise that because the media wouldn't tell you, but it was our votes that stopped Qantas being sold off overseas. We released 30,000 people from detention on a Chev scheme where if they could pay for themselves and they went to work in rural communities, they could apply for another visa. And you know, that took away the releasing of people into ghettos in the cities where they'd have no hope for themselves, and also saved the taxpayers about $10 billion a year of support that they were previously giving them. We saved the low-income super for nearly 3 million women in Australia. And that was a scheme where if you're earning about what equivalent to the dole, but you're working, you weren't getting the money off the government would provide you $500 for your retirement every year. But Tony Abbott wanted to abolish that. If that had happened, we would have had another 2 or 3% of Australians unemployed, not being productive. So what's important about our country is that we band together, and I can report to you right across Australia now, our membership's now gone beyond 10,000 members throughout the country. And we opened up for endorsements only yesterday, and we're being flooded with people that want to step forward and carry the torch forward. I've got a high regard and a responsibility to ensure that they have the means and the capital to get our message out. You've probably seen in North Queensland a little bit about our television advertising and some of the policies that we're rolling out, but that's really just a trial. From January, everything starts in a more serious mode, and you'll be seeing a plan for this country that will reinvigorate the nation and bring us back to where we should be, at full employment and growing, because this is a very prosperous country. Already the budget is being balanced, and they said they couldn't balance it for 4 or 5 years, and that's because they can't keep Australians down forever. That we've got such a strong economic performance. We're one of only 13 countries in the world that got a AAA credit rating. Our debt, believe it or not, our government debt is in the lowest in the OECD, with the third lowest in government debt in the OECD. That's not what they tell you. That's not what you hear on television, because they don't want to accept the responsibility that they should be providing more opportunities for growth in our regions and more industries and more employment. And unless we do that, we'll see more and more children and more people in communities being broken up, having to go to Sydney and Melbourne to find a job and not finding a job here in Cairns. So the battle really starts here in Cairns. It starts in your community. And public service has no reward. History is its only reward. So I've asked myself that question, and I'm doing all I can. I'm sure Jan is too. It's time that you ask yourself that question. What more can I do for my country? What more can I do for my community? And how can I help for a positive change? One way is by getting Jan elected as a member for Leichhardt. By not just thinking about yourself, but thinking about your neighbours, your friends, and how many people you can bring to the fight to help her support your community and support yourself and your children. It's in everybody's benefit that we do that. I hope in the coming days ahead you'll all think about it, you'll do what you can and involve the whole community in supporting Jan as the next member for Leichhardt. Thanks very much.